We welcome in our 1320 Kings insider and creator of the Kings Beat, our man James Ham. Hammer, what's happening, my friend?
Hi, friends.
My guy.
It's
Come
a
on,
little
Hammer.
crazy. It's a little crazy out here.
Give us an update. Break the news.
I ain't got nothing.
No big deal is done. Let's go. Come on, Hammer.
This thing is wild. That's all I got to say.
Bradley Beal is headed to Sacramento.
Whew.
No. What do you think about all of this, James? I know you and Sean and Brendan got together yesterday and talked about this on the pod. Like, what do you think about all of this chatter? And by the way, just be fair to everything. It's chatter season. There's a reason I heard something. There's a reason James was able to follow up on this. They want us to know. It's that time of year. Mm-hmm. It's the time for talking with the draft approaching and free agency approaching. James, what do you make of all this stuff?
Well, I think the key word that you said there is they. They want you to hear. And so everyone at this point, they need to figure out that there are a lot of theys out there, and each of theys have a reason why they're saying what they're saying, and you need to track each of these things patiently and carefully. I just wrote on this at the Kings Beat, and I think the biggest thing for me is both of these two rumors. They have a tremendous amount of value to the Sacramento Kings. And also, since Monty McNair took over the team, it's almost been like modus operandi to make sure that your name is mentioned in every single one of these big name players, right? And it's almost like there's a boilerplate somewhere where when you're putting out a rumor, it has to mention the Sacramento Kings. And it's something that we've been dealing with for like the last 3 years. And I don't mind it. It's fun. It adds excitement. It adds content for us to discuss, things for me to write about and all that. But these two rumors in particular are different, in my opinion. Let's start with the Bradley Beal rumor. And the Bradley Beal rumor is so different because somebody is willing to put out there that Bradley Beal would waive his no trade clause to go to Sacramento. And that is absolutely crazy in my book because, look, Bradley Beal, 3-time All-Star, he's a max money player. Let's just put it that way. I mean, he's owed, it's something like $207 million over the next 4 years. If I'm the Kings, I'm not touching him with a 10-foot pole when you look at the contracts and you looked at like over the last 4 seasons, he's played like 206 out of 308 games, right? That's a little sketchy, and I'm a little worried about some of that stuff. But the thing about the Bradley Beal deal is if a player like this is willing to come to Sacramento, he's willing to have somebody put that out there, that's huge. It's huge for the Kings because I've been in the room while assistant general managers are trying to explain how things are different in Sacramento now, and we're going to be able to go out and get that big free agent. We're going to be able to go out and get that big player, and they're talking out of the wrong hole. Like you're just like, hey man, that ain't happening. We've been here long enough to know that that's not happening. You are not going to get an A-list free agent. This is the equivalent of that. An A-list free agent just said he's willing to waive a no trade clause and go to Sacramento. That to me is crazy. And so that would be the first thing. That means that the Kings are on the right path. That the powers that be in the league, whether it's, teams or players or agents around the league, they're feeling something different in Sacramento. And they're willing to like listen and be part of what's happening in Sacramento. So I think that that's really, really tremendous for the Sacramento Kings. Whether they get Bradley Beal or not, it doesn't matter. And then the other trade rumor is OG Anunoby. And this is the guy. Like, really, if you're going to take the next step, OG Anunoby is the guy for Sacramento Kings. He's not your A-list where you're going out and getting Kevin Durant, but he is a defensive stopper that does everything that Harrison Barnes does on the offensive end, but he leads the league in steals. He's one of the best team defenders. He's one of the best on-ball defenders. He's a game changer. I've had someone within the walls of Golden One Center in the past tell me that they believe he is a defensive cultural changer that could really, really change everything for the Sacramento Kings and somehow get their 24th ranked defense way up higher than that. So these are huge. Again, I don't know what it takes to get either one of these guys. I can speculate on what it would take. I can put packages together like anyone else can on the trade machine, but with a little bit more understanding of some of the things that are going on. But like the OG Anunoby one is the one that I circle and say, okay, if you're legitimately going to maintain and improve, you maintained on the offensive end, you improved on the defensive end, you got 5 years younger, you got better, and that would be a home run swing for the Sacramento Kings.
Well, James, let's speculate. That's what we do. We got time.
That's what we do.
I think for both players, what it would take to get them would be a little less than what people probably think. I think a lot of people are thinking Keegan Murray. I don't think Keegan Murray needs to be involved and would be involved in either one of those deals. And I also think they would have different prices, right? I think Washington wouldn't look for as much back as far as like player wise, but we looking for draft capital. I think Toronto would want a player they feel could come in there and start and play, and maybe you don't have to add the type of draft capital. I think both of them are reasonable. Both potential prices, are reasonable for the Kings. What do you think a trade package for either one of those guys looks like?
Yeah, I mean, it's really complicated for Bradley Beal. First of all, the Kings can make a deal. Here's one of the issues the Sacramento Kings have right now. They only have 7 players on guaranteed contracts, right? And we know the 7. It's Fox, Mitchell, Herter, Monk, Sabonis, Keegan Murray, and Rashawn Holmes, right? So in order to make moves and in order to match salaries, you have to do one of two things. You have to either trade salary or you have to clear massive amounts of salary in order to make a trade like this. And by clearing massive amounts of salary, basically by saying that you're going to go after Bradley Beal, you would have to say goodbye to Harrison Barnes and his $27.5 million cap hold. And you'd have to try to become a true cap space team in one trade scenario, right? So if you give up something like Rashawn Holmes, Davion Mitchell, and Kevin Herter, the deal works functionally, but it really doesn't. You got to be within 20% of the trade amount. So Bradley Beal's making, $47 million, something like that this year. So you're looking at like $36 million. Maybe you come close with that package right there to the percentage, but you're still going to have to absorb some of his salary into your natural cap space. And that would mean that not only have you made that trade, you would probably have to say goodbye to Harrison Barnes in that trade. Even if you're not trading him, you would have to waive your rights to him. So it's a complex trade. And then on top of that, they're going to want draft capital. And so are we talking 2 first-round picks? Are we talking 3 first-round picks? I don't know what the answer is to that. I don't know how much Bradley Beal is worth on the open market. Again, he's missed an average of 25 games a season for the last 4, and he's just about to turn 30. So those things, it really is difficult for me to rubber stamp a Bradley Beal trade. I get it. He's more talented. He's an all-star level player, but at the same time, is he an upgrade over all that you have to give up? So in order to get Bradley Beal, you have to give up your backup point guard. You have to give up your starting shooting guard. You got to give up your starting small forward, and you got to give up a piece in Rashawn Holmes and draft capital. So that's a lot. And so if we go to the OG Anunoby deal, there's a couple of ways you could structure an OG deal. If they're looking for players and picks, you could look at something like a Kevin Herter, which again, I feel bad mentioning people's names like this, but it is what it is. We're speculating. We're talking about it.
That's all we're doing.
Yeah. And the reason why I say that too is that's where we get into this issue that the Kings only have 7 players and they only have so many players that actually have, actual contracts that you can trade. And that's a big deal. That's a problem in some senses. In another sense, you've got cap space that you can play with. The Kings could rescind the rights to Harrison Barnes and actually absorb OG Anunoby into their cap space in a trade. They could trade for nothing. They could trade for air, basically, and then draft picks. They could also do a package of Davion Mitchell and Rashawn Holmes. That works functionally as far as salary cap space. And that's something like where if the Kings are going to do a deal, they'd probably want to include a guy like Holmes. And then we look at, again, the Kevin Huerter thing. Kevin Huerter makes, I think it's 17 million this coming year, 16, 17 million. It works cap wise. You could do a straight up swap for OG Anunoby, but then you're going to have to backfill with again, like draft picks, some sort of draft capital. So again, like that's not to say that I think the Kings should trade Kevin Huerter. It's just if you look at the functionality of the Kings cap, you look at the fact that like a guy like Malik Monk has value to the Kings, but he probably has more value to the Kings than other teams because he's on a 1-year contract and he has no Larry Bird rights at the end of it. The Kings, from everything you've heard and everything I've heard, Damian, are not including Keegan Murray in any of those discussions.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just off the table. So now we start talking about, well, who else do you trade? You're not trading Sabonis. You're not trading Fox. You're not trading Murray. Monk is hard to trade. You only have 3 more guys on your roster that are under contract. So that's why I bring these guys up in this type of discussion. And it is what it is. Like when you're trying to put packages together for trades, you want to come away with the best possible outcome for your team, and the other team is trying the same thing. There's even like another way where I could see the Kings in Toronto working on a much bigger deal because Gary Trent has the option of opting out of his contract at $20 million for the season. He has a player option, and like a package of Davion Mitchell and Rashawn Holmes and Kevin Huerter work for the pair of them. You could actually make that kind of swap, and then you could work on an extension for a guy like Gary Trent once he got in Sacramento. So again, there's all kinds of things that could happen here, but like in a deal like that, you're giving up so much draft capital. It's crazy.
We talked a bit last night. Can you explain to us, because you explained it to me last night and I actually didn't know this, about what it would look like for if this scenario of OG Anunoby being a Sacramento King actually takes place. And the one thing I kept thinking as James was talking, boy, this would be so much easier if Harrison had 1 year left on his deal. This like whole conversation would be different if Harrison had 1 year left on his deal. Can you explain OG Anunoby's, because he has the ability to opt out next year, and I know as we've been talking about this and tweeting about this, that concerns some Kings fans. But you hit me to something about an extension with OG Anunoby that I didn't know about.
Yeah, so it's complex. So I actually tomorrow I have a podcast dropping with Eric Pincus, who is the capologist, cap expert for Bleacher Report, and he does the sports business classroom with Larry Kuhn down in Las Vegas during Summer League. He's absolutely spectacular. He understands the cap better than like 99.9% of America, and probably better than a lot of the general managers and assistant general managers in the league. He's one of those guys. And so basically the way that this would work is OG Anunoby cannot, he can get an extension and be traded, but the extension that he can get from the Toronto Raptors this season alone is limited to just a 5% pay increase. And there's no way that OG Anunoby is going to take a 5% increase to get traded, to get a much longer deal. He has a contract for $19.9 million next season, but it's a player option, which he can opt out of, which should scare Kings, right? Kings fans. It should scare, and the Kings. I mean, that's a big deal. But there's a couple of things that we'll go through. There is a way for once he's traded, if he stays on the roster for 6 months, he is now eligible for the other extension that we've talked about, that Domantas Sabonis can get, and that is 140% of his current salary. And to me, I like OG Anunoby. I think he's a really, really solid player. A starting salary at $26 million with 8% raises that caps out at like 117 million over 4 years. That seems really fair, if that makes sense. So basically, if they traded for him now and we get to like right around January 1st or whenever the trade actually happens, January 6th, January 10th, you could then go back and offer him an extension at that point for that would start after next season. So you wouldn't have to go into next summer with the risk of both Sabonis and Monk and uh, and OG Anunoby all being on the final year going into an unrestricted free agent status for the summer. That would be a little scary for the Kings. So that's a big deal. You can do this, right? And then the other piece that I'm going to point out is there's a reason why OG Anunoby is being mentioned to Sacramento, and it's because there are forces in play here, right? And I think if we start drawing like lines from what happened and how you get this information or where this is coming from or who would put information like this out there, a lot of this I think we can tie directly to Rich Paul, who just happens to be OG Anunoby's agent, who also happens to be De'Aaron Fox's agent. And I think first and foremost, the biggest thing for me, some of the biggest news is that it's possible that Rich Paul, the biggest power broker in the NBA, is trying to make a super team in Sacramento. Fans should be like, wait, what's happening? And that's something that I think should be pointed out, that if this is all true and this does come to fruition, it would be with the understanding that Rich Paul had his finger on the scales in this situation and was trying to get OG to a perfect spot for him to find success, to make more money, to be the player that everyone thinks he can be, where he'd come into Sacramento as probably a second scoring option and certainly a top 3 or 4 option on the team overall. But that is a really good spot for your guy to come in, make a bunch of money, find notoriety, be on a team that's on the rise, go to a team that ranked 24th in defense last year and has a potential to take a huge jump, which if you're a second team all defensive player would make you look even better. So these are situations where you start to look at it and go, okay, this makes some sense that we could see a creation of something here in Sacramento that is different than we've ever seen before. But it makes sense. You have a great fan base. You have a great facility. You have a great training facility. You've got a great coach. You got a bunch of young players. And OG Anunoby he'll turn 26 on July 17th, I think it is. And he fits the player need. He fits the player arc. He fits everything, the positional need for this team to a T. And so I think it's one of those situations where you look around the league and you have a player and you go, what would be the best case scenario for my player? And if you take everything away that you've thought about Sacramento in the past and you give them a reset button, Sacramento should be a really, really perfect landing spot for a guy like OG Anunoby.
I love it. I love the idea of OG. I said before, like I yesterday I was like, as much as I would probably want Bradley Beal here, just because I think he's the best player in everything that's been discussed. Like, people are trading away, people are getting Bradley Beal is the best player. You get opportunity to get him. I would want that, but I understand that OG is a seamless fit and probably better for the fit. Thought about it a little bit more, and I still think OG is the better fit, but I think people are discounting what Bradley Beal coming to Sacramento would do for this franchise and their ceiling. I think if Bradley Beal deal went down, you kept Keegan Murray, we're talking one of those top 5 teams in the league. I think, you're getting a guy, Bradley Beal, who I'm not asking him to come in here and average 20. Damien asked me earlier, what do you think he would do here? I got conservative. I said 17, 18 points a game. And they were like, I think you're going to do more than that. Fox, Beal in the backcourt, top 5, top 3 backcourt in the league. I think that could be potential to like elevate to another level that I don't think people are seeing. I think they're looking at it like, we don't want Beal. That's just a name or whatever the case may be. No, I think you'd be a title contender if you got Bradley Beal. And much like you just talked about, James, I'll let you rock in just a second. That information was out for a reason. That information came from, and it didn't come from the Wizards. It came out for a reason from a specific person. I think from the Bradley Beal side, then I think he, just like the comment said, he'd absolutely love coming to Sacramento and being part of this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that Bradley Beal's a bad player. Actually, I love Bradley Beal's game. I think he's a slight defensive upgrade over Kevin Huerter. I think he's not as good a shooter as Kevin Huerter, but he's a much better creator. He's a much better overall package player, and just like higher in skill level. The problem is, again, am I taking a 30-year-old Bradley Beal over a 26-year-old, 25, 26-year-old OG Anunoby? And that's a tough thing. And that's where I start to go, okay, I'm not sure. Plus, I'll also point this out. Like when we start talking about, like, again, I wish I had a big whiteboard right next to me and I could start like blocking out things. If you look at the pure, if you look at the pure salary structure, right? We're looking at a player who comes in who makes 50 million bucks. You already have a player who makes $32 million. You're going to have another player who makes between 35 and 45 million in Sabonis. All of a sudden, you're out of salary cap space. It's over. You're done. And you're talking about being a luxury tax team. Now, look, that makes a ton of sense if you're pushing for a title every year. And that's totally possible. But when you look at OG Anunoby, not only is he like 4 years younger, but on top of the 4 years younger, he's going to make roughly half as much over the entirety of the contract. And that allows you to have other players on top of that. Even in this specific year, if we're looking at this salary cap for this summer, all that stuff, if you're able to get OG Anunoby and you're able to get him in a salary exchange in addition to picks. So whether that's, again, the Herder conversation or it's Davion and Rashawn, whatever that conversation is, if you're able to get him in almost a one-to-one like salary swap, all of a sudden the Kings not only have OG Anunoby, they also have 20-something million dollars in cap space, or they still have a mid-level exception, a biannual exception, and still cap space. Like they have all of these other mechanisms that they can still build out the rest of the roster. So we're talking about, OG, if you can get OG Anunoby and like for all intents and purposes, you're losing your backup point guard and draft capital and a big man that's not playing for you and didn't play hardly at all this entire season, and you still have all of your money, that's crazy talk. Now you're talking about being able to go out and add not only Sasha Vezenkov, but two or maybe one extremely good player or two really solid players. So when you bring up Beal versus OG Anunoby, it might be something more like Beal and Naz Reid and a backup point guard instead of Brad. I mean, that would be OG instead of Beal. And that's where you start to really get into team building. I just worry that the Bradley Beal contract, especially if you have two other players that are going to make money, it just becomes obscene. At some point, there's no way you can pay it. And you're not even like the Atlanta Hawks. You're in much worse shape than that. You're looking at Golden State Warriors category in like 3 years when Keegan's money starts going up and other players start going up. And what do you do with a guy like Malik Monk, who's going to have to get paid? That's just already, you're talking about 4 or 5 players and all of your cap spaces is blown out and you're already, 10, 15 million over the cap and in the luxury, and it's going to be difficult to continue your build.
I think you said this regarding Brad, but I don't think you said it regarding OG. There's probably not a scenario that makes sense for everyone involved, be it financially or fit-wise, where OG Anunoby, and you already laid out the Bradley Beal scenario, so I'll focus on OG Anunoby. If he lands in Sacramento, there's probably no situation that works for everyone involved in which Harrison Barnes is also here. Correct?
No, it's still possible. No, it's totally possible. I mean, that's why I'm just talking about there. Like, there's a possibility. So
you said
look,
that the money would be there, but does it make sense?
well, that would be the question. Does it make sense? And are you better off with lower end options? Again, you're bringing Sasha Vazenkov over. You could still have the rights to a guy like Trey Lyles. So you are still doing some of the things that you need to do, some of the players you need to bring back, but you still have to address your backup center position. It's going to cost you something. So either you're looking at a new shooting guard or you're looking at a backup point guard, whatever it is, you're still going to have holes in your roster. You're not getting him for free, even if it's some of it, the value is in draft capital. You're going to have to replace holes. But yes, there is a way in which you could do that. And it's pretty basic. I mean, once you made the trade, you would still have all your rights to Harrison Barnes. You could then negotiate whatever it is that you're going to do with Harrison Barnes. So if you can get him at like a 3-year, $45 million contract, starts at $15 million, then you would still have, like $4 to $6 million in cap space. But in that scenario, you would also have your mid-level at $12 million. You'd also have your biannual exception of $4.4 million. So that's a good scenario to be in, where you all of a sudden have a player that has value. You could also, in that scenario, what you're talking about, where you do make a straight swap for salary, you would still be open to being able to do a sign and trade with Harrison. And so you could find a spot for Harrison to go. So as opposed to the Bradley Beal deal, which would almost assuredly mean that you would have to waive your Larry Bird rights to Harrison Barnes in order to make the contract work, like the incoming money. An OG Anunoby deal would be different, and you would probably be able. I mean, you might tack on a little bit of salary if you trade $17 million and he's making 18.4. You got to take on the extra $1.4 million. But the other way leaves a bunch of doors open for you to do some things.
Let's pause for a second. We'll come back. We'll talk more Kings basketball. We'll talk more rumors. We'll talk more about what these next 13 days may look like for the Sacramento Kings when we return with our 1320 Kings insider, James Ham, here on D'Lo and KC, brought to you by Sky River Casino on Sacramento Sports Leader ESPN 1320. Clear.
Look at all these rumors.
Alex, this is a great comment. But Beal gets you hardware like Golden State Warriors. Last time I checked, Bradley Beal never does anything in the playoffs, and OG Anunoby has a title. Just saying. He got that ring, Alex.
I wish you tell the whole story. That is
he still does.
That is not telling the whole story.
I get what you're saying there, but it doesn't matter
what title has he won or come close to winning since Kawhi left.
Well, that's true. Like you lost your superstar.
That's a little wild.
well, yeah, but where's Bradley Beal winning that title?
I'm not saying Bradley Beal has, but
I mean, has Bradley Beal made it out of the first round?
In that way, that's wild.
Yeah, I'm not sure that Bradley Beal has made it out of the first round.
Bradley Beal has won more playoff series by himself than OG has. I think
I really like Brad Beal. I have a tough time because of the money and because so first and second round, first round. So he's made it to the second round 3 times. Never made it past the second round.
OG?
No, Bradley Beal.
Yeah, he never got to the conference finals. I think Washington hasn't gotten to the conference finals since like 79 or something like that.
That's a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, it's about like building an entire team. I could even like man, if OG and Gary Trent Jr. are close, and you had to give up Kevin Huerter and a swap there, and then he could opt out of his contract and come to Sacramento, that would be intriguing. And
I think I would do the OG Anunoby. I think that's the most seamless move. It gives you that flexibility as well. I think that's the way I would go. I just think people are scoffing at what Bradley Beal comes here, you're a top 5 team in the league. And we could worry about 50, 60 million 3 years from now. Then you have a chance to win a title. You may still have a chance to win a title with OG next year too as well. That's why I would go with that deal. But Bradley Beal don't mean like you have a ceiling of the first round. Like you're a top 5 team in the NBA.
Well, but you got to factor in the fact that he misses 25 games a year.
OG misses probably 25 too.
He does miss some games, but you also have to factor in that on top of that, Bill hasn't been able to lead a team, and it's not like people, oh, he has trash. It's like, okay, Kristaps Porzingis, he had Rui Hachimura to start the season, Denny Avdija, he had Kyle Kuzma. Like, it's not like their team is just complete trash, and they don't make noise. So I don't know.
I mean, we would probably say the same thing about De'Aaron Fox before this past year.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's true. That's true. But we're looking at 5 years older. He's had a lot more opportunities. He's been in the league 10 years, and we're still talking about a guy who hasn't made it out of the second round, regardless of what team. So, and I'm not saying he's a bad player. I think he's a absolutely spectacular player. So smooth. He's a guy who certainly, like, his play on the court looks better than his stats.
And also what we're saying with that is Bradley Beal is not franchise. Like if you want to make the argument, he's not franchise. He can't carry a franchise of nothing to the playoffs. He's not coming here to be the franchise. He coming
he can pay like he's a franchise.
That's fine too. But on the court, he's coming here to be the second or third option. And that's probably who he is. He's the person that would thrive being
Hang on, James. Back here with our 1320 Kings insider and creator of the Kings Beat, James Ham. Hammer, before we get back to the Kings, any thoughts on Ja Morant's 25-game suspension that was announced this morning?
Yeah, it wasn't enough. And
really?
And I get the arguments out there. I just like it's a cry for help, and I get that he just lost his supermax, and that's really the punishment here. And I just think we're at a point where, like, you can't say you're going to do tough love and then not do tough love. I mean, this was what everyone expected in the beginning. And then Adam Silver comes out talking like he's about to drop the hammer on somebody.
Yeah, that was Adam's fault. Like Adam dropped the ball on that.
He white gloved him.
He if he had just announced the day before the final started or before game 1, Ja Morant's been suspended for 25 games. None of this would have gotten as carried away as it did. It was that press conference that made us start thinking, is this dude getting suspended for 50 games? Like that body language, that verbiage, that like expression, that was, I mean, and that's Adam Silver. Adam Silver's cold. He's not the warmest, friendliest, warmest, welcomingest human being, but it was those press conferences and the subsequent interviews about Ja Morant that really set the scale for our thinking. And then to just announce the 25-game suspension, it was like, I'm fine with it being 25 games. You should have just announced that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Then it would have got eaten in the news cycle of the finals. That would have been fine. But
I think he had this completely backwards. Like I think that's how this was going to work, completely backwards.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now it stands out. Yeah.
But hey, I'll say this though, man. I mean, they doubled the suspension from what he got before. Like what happened is not 50, 60 games worthy. It's just not. Like, and then
you know what?
And we can say things directly or indirectly. Like we said, he lost his ability to make, the supermax.
He's lost about $38 million.
Yeah, he lost that, and that's
suspension.
That's not part of the suspension, but that matters. Same thing with Miles Bridges. He got 30 games. Him being gone for a year isn't part of the suspension, but that's the consequences as well. I thought it was about right, man. They more than doubled the first punishment. And if he does it again and they more than double it again, then he'll be out for the season like, some people want him. But I thought this was fair.
Yeah, the reason why I don't think it's fair, I'll make this argument. It's that you hit him with the suspension the first time, You had conversations with him. He promised to do things differently. He promised to get help. He said the right things. He did and said all the right things initially. And then he came back and did the same stupid thing right afterwards and just spit in your face. And I mean, Adam Silver met with him. He made promises to Adam Silver. And that's where it's like, look, he doesn't get it. And taking away 38 million bucks, I don't think that's going to hurt him because he makes so much money. It doesn't really matter. Like, should that matter? Yeah, it should matter. But like to him, he's making so much money between his Nike and his regular contract it's not going to damage him all that much. And you're letting him off the hook. You're letting him come back after 25 games and hoping that he learned his lesson this time. And then there's going to be stipulations and all that stuff. Yeah, whatever. There were stipulations last time and none of it worked. And he didn't go through the steps he was supposed to take. And he blew you off and then he did it again. And so the next time he does it, I don't think it'll be a year. I think it'll be basically what they do is a lifetime ban, but with the ability to resubmit in a year or the ability to resubmit in 2 years. Like that's where he's at. He's on a very, very short leash and he should be. Like these are things that you shouldn't be. You're a role model to young kids. That's what the NBA is about. And I get the old, Charles Barkley, I'm not a role model. Yeah, but he wasn't running around waving a gun in a society where people are getting shot and killed every single day. And so, yeah.
Girls.
What's that?
So yeah, he was spitting at little girls in the front row.
Yeah,
I don't think he tried to hit the little girl though. To be fair to Charles.
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't he punching people out at
throwing them through glass windows?
Like, yeah, and that's fine. James wants justice, by the way. Like when it comes to punishments, James, this is his life of being married to an attorney. He wants justice.
James Ham, Texas Ranger.
No, I want responsibility. Take responsibility for your actions. Don't give me some crap fake apology, which he's done twice now. Give me some actually own up to it and be part of it. Figure out a way to be an answer, not
stay away from Jalen Rose.
Yeah,
don't go near Jalen Rose.
That was a bad job.
Yeah, just don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution, and that's it. You're blessed with athletic gifts. You're blessed with being able to play in the NBA, and clearly he's worked hard on his game, and he's an incredible basketball player. But sometimes it's not just about that. Like, be better than that, and you have an opportunity to bring change and to be something special, and you're not doing it. You're flipping that on its head. You're feeding into a negative, culture thing that is a problem. It's a problem in our society.
Yeah, we did the math wrong. I don't know if you caught that. The number that he lost from the extension was the Supermax was 39. That puts his money at about 47.6 million that he's lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
but he's
7.6.
Right. Or he's going to lose. Yeah.
Yeah. He's still got his Nike contract. He didn't.
No, he's not poor. Like he's going to eat. He's not like this pretty well. He don't got to worry about the kids. He's okay.
And he got a Nike contract, but he ain't got LeBron and KD's Nike contract.
He ain't got that.
Like he got a good one, not a great one.
Yeah,
he got a good one though.
He's got a good one, and he's lost negotiating power. He's lost a lot of negotiating power. But the Ja Morant, that's 25 games. We talked about Brandon Clark earlier. We talked about the Memphis Grizzlies earlier, where you talk about Ja Morant all you want to. Their big issue, Brandon Clark's out. And Steven Adams, if they can't rectify the Steven Adams problem, Memphis could be in a really interesting spot by the time Ja Morant returns. And by interesting, I mean like playing territory.
Yeah, I mean that if they're lucky, you're going to be relying on Steven Adams, who had PRP in his knee, and it didn't seem to react well. You talked about Jaren Jackson Jr., who we keep talking about all these other guys that miss games. That dude missed games historically, and so that's going to be an issue. Yeah, I mean that's a team that do they still have enough talent? They might. They've done a great job of drafting and building their talent base overall over the last couple of years. I mean, finding guys like Desmond Bane is just incredible. But also, remember the Dylan Brooks thing. They're not inviting Dylan Brooks back. and they're not a team that has all kinds of cap space to go out and sign someone major, from what I know. And so that's a problem for them as well, and they're going to have to figure that one out. But again, Jaren Jackson he's missed a ton of games in his career. Of course, the 1 year he got hurt and played 11 games, but he only played 68 this last year. I mean, 63 this last year. He's got a 58 and a 57 in his past, and an 11. Like, yeah, that's a lot to bank on going into a season where you were the 2 seed last year.
Do you have any interest in Dillon Brooks?
We got into this discussion on the podcast with Brennan and Sean the other day, and both of them are saying yes, and I'm like a maybe. And like, it's not about the antics for me. It's about play style and about, like, I know he's a great defender. He can score, but he's super inefficient. And that's kind of not what this Sacramento Kings team was about. They're not an inefficient group. It's all about playing within the system and playing to each other's strengths. And the dude can be a chucker. I mean, we're talking about a guy who shot under 40% in his career from the field. I don't know. Like, it's still, I'm kind of up in the air. If you were going after him as the Harrison Barnes replacement, I mean, I know he's up there defensively, but I still think he's a pretty substantial step down from a guy like OG Anunoby, who fits his system.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I like Dillon. I've always said that, I would bring him in, but I'm bringing him in for, an off the bench type of piece. I wouldn't look at that as the answer at small forward, starting small forward and things of that nature, because I do value his toughness and his defense. But all the things that you mentioned, James, the erratic, offensive performances, I can't rely on that on this particular team. I need that to be functioning like a well-oiled machine, and he might be someone that literally has a screw loose. So, yeah, I take him as a bench guy, not a starter.
I'm okay with some of the screw loose stuff. Like, the Kings do need that punch you in the face guy. Like, they don't really. I mean, if they have it, it's a bonus. We saw Trey Lyles step up in a moment, but
Malik, I give Malik. He's just a guard, but I
yeah,
Malik is like that. He got in a scuffle.
I think Malik likes to talk a lot. And I just think, like, Dillon Brooks is super, super physical. And so I'm okay with, like, Dillon Brooks as a defender and all that. I'm just a little wary on, like, the bad mid-range jump shots all the time, and feeling like you have to be part of the offensive game, when realistically you got Ja, you've got Desmond Bane, you've got Jaren Jackson Jr. You have all these other guys that can actually score. His role should have been to take a pretty substantial step back to like 12 to 14 points a game, but be a lot more efficient, and let the other guys do that while he took care of a lot of the defensive side. And that's not something that he's done. And so you're hoping that he would take that step with you, but trying to, like, sign an NBA player and make him into something that he's never been is pretty tough for me. I mean, he shot like 39.6% from the field last year, and he's not a good 3-point shooter, like, overall. So where you got Harrison Barnes at like a career 38 something, this is a guy who's going to struggle here and there.
Looking at the Western Conference, James, I chuckle, regardless of an acquisition of OG Anunoby or anybody else. I feel like the Sacramento Kings are going to fly under the radar again, because when you look at the West, you've got obviously the Denver Nuggets are going to be the defending champions, and most people think they're going to have the ability to get back there and be in that position again. There's regularly going to be eyes on teams like the Golden State Warriors and the Los Angeles Lakers, and where do they fit in all this? And this doesn't even require any trade acquisitions or free agency acquisitions. It's just the nature of those two teams. And then you recognize Oklahoma City is probably going to have a lot of eyes on them, because they were, a bit above their head. You talk about maximizing potential. They probably exceeded their potential last year, and you're adding Chet Holmgren. And then people are going to be watching San Antonio. They're going to be watching San Antonio, and Houston could kind of fall into this as well, depending on what the next couple of weeks look like for them. They could be teams like, and I'm not suggesting that San Antonio and Houston are suddenly 1 and 2 seeds. I'm just suggesting their storylines. And when you get into just a pure storyline standpoint, not talking about wins, not talking about losses, Sacramento for 25 games, Memphis is going to be watched a little closer than they might be, for the final 60 or whatever, 50 something. I think the Kings could potentially fly under the radar again, regardless of what happens over the course of the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think like we talk about like national TV schedule and stuff. The Spurs are going to get a ton of national TV games, and like there's potential for them to add some pieces and be an intriguing team. I still think that the Spurs are like 2 to 3 years away from being like a playoff contender, like a true playoff contender, like someone who is going to make the playoffs, but then has the potential to go like 6 through 3 through 6, 3 through 7. I don't think we're there. Even if Victor Wembanyama is everything he's supposed to be, he's still going to take that much time to get up to speed and like to be dominant at the NBA level. And then I'd say the same thing about the Houston Rockets. Like the Houston Rockets have a bunch of talent, but talent, like it doesn't mean anything if you can't put it together. And, that's why we start hearing the James Harden stuff and all that, trying to sneak into the back end of the playoffs. But, a team like the Utah Jazz, I think that they're a team who's still taking steps backwards. And, we'll probably, if Portland doesn't do something dramatic, and even if they do something dramatic, like we talked about
Portland, I completely forgot about Portland. Yeah.
And they had a report out there today too, that allegedly they're not interested in the rookie route. They're trying to add something for Dame. I think people are calling for Dame, and they're like, no, we're not trying to get another rookie. We're trying to bring somebody in. So
yeah, but I put it this way: like if the deal that they're floating around out there, that they're willing to give up Anthony Simons and the number 3 pick for a star level player, like if they make that move and come away with Bradley Beal, they're not a title contender.
Not even close.
They're not.
Not even close.
They're away from. So like, how do you get there? That's
That's the thing. Portland doesn't get there. Like I don't see the route with a single acquisition in which Portland gets there.
Right.
I don't see it.
Yeah, even like the Brandon Ingram conversation. People are like, oh, maybe they'll trade Brandon Ingram for the top 3 pick. Okay. Like, does that put
that's what
got me thinking.
That's interesting. I just don't think New Orleans does that though. That's to me, not the same, but like sure, send Jason Tatum to Portland and it might work. Like I don't think the Pelicans are moving Brandon Ingram. Like I think they'd rather move Zion than Brandon Ingram. And I know the report is they don't want to move Zion. Maybe they don't want to move either. But if push comes to shove, I don't think they want to trade Brandon Ingram.
Well, I would spin this back around on you guys then, and I would say, okay, who would you rather have, Brandon Ingram or OG Anunoby?
Brandon Ingram.
Oh.
No, we're not even.
If I'm the Sacramento Kings,
about Sacramento,
yeah, we're not even thinking.
Oh, Brandon Ingram.
Brandon Ingram.
Oh, I don't know. You're not better defensively. You don't get any better defensively.
That's okay.
You got the better player.
That's okay.
I don't know. Like we have that discussion, but
I'm surprised.
I'm surprised that you guys think that like Bradley Beal wouldn't be a playoff team at all. But if you had Brandon Ingram instead, with
we said a
Portland.
Title team in Portland. We said a title team.
Oh yeah.
Not a playoff team. They're making the playoffs. So
a title team with Brandon Ingram and
wait, you're talking about Brandon Ingram in Portland? I thought you were talking about Brandon Ingram here when you said Ingram or OG Anunoby. I thought you were talking about Sacramento.
Well, no, I was the second time, but when we first were talking, like when we started this, it was about we talked if Bradley Beal was in Portland, would you make the playoff? I mean, would you be a title contender? And it was like, no.
No.
And then we said, well, what if they did Brandon Ingram, a trade for number 3? And you guys were like, oh, well, maybe now we're talking. And I'm like,
you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'm still confused. You think Brandon Ingram is better than Bradley Beal?
I think
it's a better fit.
I think it's a better
fit. I don't know. I really like Brandon Ingram, but like defensive minded and all that stuff.
Wait,
like
I'm sorry.
In Sacramento. In Sacramento.
Wait a minute.
Either way.
in Sacramento, you'd rather have OG Anunoby than Brandon Ingram?
I would.
No.
Yeah, like my list would probably be if we're dealing with, let's say, like 3 of the young small forwards, it would be Mikal Bridges, followed by OG Anunoby, followed by Brandon Ingram. Like
Okay.
OG,
I agree with the Mikal Bridges thing.
yeah, I mean, OG
Oh,
Anunoby is an absolute game changer on the defensive end. Brandon Ingram's
I don't
not.
care. Brandon
He's
Ingram.
another really good offensive player. You got a bunch of those.
You needed somebody.
I'll roll the dice.
You didn't lose.
I'll take
You didn't
my
lose to the
chances.
Warriors because you didn't play defense. You lost to the Warriors because once they bottled up Fox and Monk, you had nobody else to create, and they were leaving Davion Mitchell wide open. So Mike Brown felt like, I can't put him out there. I got to play Terrence Davis. Like, you didn't lose because you didn't play defense, or you're the 24th worst defense team in the league. You lost because you didn't have nobody to get a shot. You get Brandon Ingram or Bradley Beal to take that last shot in game 4. Maybe I don't even think they're leaving him wide open. They're not leaving those two wide open. And Fox can go 1-on-1.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll never know. But that's just for my money. I like Anunoby more. You're right. Brandon Ingram's a better creator. But like all the positives that you get from Anunoby and his defensive prowess, mixed in with the fact that, he averages like close to 17 points a game. Like, it's not like he's a bad offensive player. He's equal to or greater than the Harrison Barnes that you saw the last like 3 years in Sacramento. So,
which we're trying to improve from. I'm just saying, which we're trying to improve from. I do think the defense is the game changer when you talk about OG. He may do the same things offensively, but he's a better defender than Harrison Barnes is. And that's where you look at OG and you say he could take us to another level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's just like the versatility of OG on the defensive end.
When players hear this stuff, what do you think they say? What do you think they say? Like, when players hear these discussions, do you think they say, "Oh, man, OG, yeah, we gotta get OG," or are they? Oh man, are they calling Monty like, "Hey, is this true? Go get Brad. Go get OG. Go get one of those guys." Like, what do you think the team thinks about these two guys?
I don't know. There's always going to be like personal ties
Harrison
and all
don't
that
give
stuff.
a damn about either one of them, I'm gonna guess.
Oh no. Like, when it comes to like, I feel bad for Harrison because I mean, he's just kind of hanging out there.
Yeah.
And we don't know what's going to happen with Harrison. And, like, we have enough information to know that like they've at least had conversations with the Kings, and whether those have been tabled or not right now, I want a little bit more clarification on some of the stuff that I've heard. But at the same time, like, he's going to be the guy who has to kind of wait. And he has to wait because, again, there's only 7 teams, I believe, with cap space, enough cap space to sign him. And then there's another like 11 teams that have the mid-level exception. And so if he misses out on those 7 teams with cap space, that means that he's in the MLE bucket with everybody else, or he has to go back to the Kings and ask the Kings to work with him. And so, yeah, I think this is like, I feel bad for the guy because he's been a consummate pro. But at the same time, if you're the Kings, it's maintain and improve. It's not maintain. And the difference is that Harrison Barnes, is 31, and that the OG Anunoby is 26, or almost 26. And he's got, plenty of room to improve and get better. And he led the league in steals last year, and he can lock down like 2 through 4 without a problem. And not only that, but he improves your overall defense. So yeah, it's tough. I hate seeing players kind of like stuck out there in the wind, but at least he's healthy and he's happy, and he's made a lot of money, and he gets to make a decision for himself at some point.
Yeah, I don't think his phone's not going to be ringing if nothing gets done with Sacramento.
For sure.
I'm confident his phone is going to be ringing 2 weeks from today.
Oh yeah.
He'll have suitors, and I honestly think he'll have championship shooters. I think those are the types of teams that will be looking for a play. I just don't know financially what Harrison and his team are looking for. Like I've heard things. James has. I don't know that he might. There might be a king's price, and then there might be an everybody else price. But we'll find out soon enough, I guess.
Yeah, you talk about championship contenders, like the Boston Celtics were always interested in Harrison Barnes. The Philadelphia 76ers always interested in Harrison Barnes. And I guarantee you the Miami Heat loves guys like Harrison Barnes. They would take him anytime. Like a bunch of Eastern Conference teams would love to have Harrison Barnes.
He'd be really good in Miami.
He would.
He kind of plays where Jimmy does.
I agree.
They might use the same spot.
I agree.
I was thinking about Max Strauss, like replacing him, but he kind of plays the Jimmy spot.
I'll say this. I'm going to need to see a recorded phone call of Brad calling Harrison to believe that the Celtics Harrison thing is true. Like this has been out there so many years, and I was told definitively, yeah, this isn't true. I need to see it before I believe it. Because this has been out there, and part of it is freaking Brian Scalabrine. When we I don't know when we as a society get to the point where we just don't listen to him anymore, and we just ignore the stuff that he says when he talks. I think we'll all be in a far better place.
Don't we have a list of those guys now? Like,
there's a
list of them.
Oh, there's a long list, James Ham. Thankfully, we're not on it. You're not on it.
Hey, James.
Neither are Sean Cunningham.
Happy Father's Day, big dog.
Hey, happy Father's Day to you, man. I'm excited. This is going to be a fun weekend. I think I got vacation next weekend. It's going to be wild. Get ready for the shootout. It's going to be wild.